I didn't expect much from that shift. Just another cold October evening at Lakeside Fun Park, watching the last few families shuffle through before the season ended. By then, everything felt like muscle memory. The hum of the carousel in the distance, the distant screech of kids on the roller coasters, the way the lights flickered just enough to remind me how old this place was. The air smelled like damp leaves and fryer grease, and I remember pulling my jacket tighter, counting the minutes until I could leave. I was already halfway gone in my head thinking about the diner run with Marcus after work when I noticed him. I don't know why he stood out at first. Just another guy wandering the park, right? But something about him made my stomach tighten. He wasn't just disheveled. Plenty of people looked rough by the end of the day. It was the way he moved, the way his head jerked from side to side like he was expecting someone to grab him from behind. His clothes were stained in places that didn't make sense. His hair matted like he'd been sleeping in it. I remember thinking that he didn't belong here. Not in a way I could explain, just in a way I felt. He walked up to me, hesitated, then asked where the bathrooms were, not in a normal way. He whispered it, barely loud enough to hear. It wasn't shyness, it was something else. I pointed up the hill, tried to sound casual, but my skin prickled when I noticed him still standing there watching me. Even as he turned to walk away, he kept glancing back over his shoulder, checking if I was still there, or checking if something else was. By the time Marcus picked me up, the whole thing should have been out of my head. Just another weird guy at the park, nothing more. That's what I told myself. Anyway, the chill from my shift lingered, but the thought of greasy food and warm air was enough to shake it off. Nell's diner wasn't fancy, cracked leather booths, a jukebox nobody used, that faint smell of burnt coffee mixed with syrup, but it was our place. After every long shift, we'd sit in the same booth, order the same thing, and just let exhaustion settle in. I should have been relaxed. Should have been laughing at something dumb, Marcus said, stealing fries off his plate. Instead, I felt it, that creeping, skin-tightening sense that I was being watched. I almost didn't turn around, almost didn't want to, but my eyes drifted, scanning the booths, the counter, the door, and then I saw him, a few tables away, sitting alone, watching. At first I thought, no, it's not him, can't be, but my stomach knew before my brain did. Same filthy clothes, same tangled hair, same hunched posture, like he was trying to disappear into the vinyl seat. He wasn't eating, wasn't even pretending to, just sitting there, looking at me. I turned back too fast, heart hammering against my ribs. Coincidence. That's what Marcus said when I told him. Just some guy. Some guy. Nothing to be freaked out about. But the words didn't settle right. My hands felt cold, even in the warmth of the diner. I kept glancing at the reflection in the window, at the shadow sitting 2 tables behind us, because coincidences don't watch you eat. The drive home should have been the part where everything settled, where my mind finally let go of the tension curling in my chest. The hum of the tires, the rhythmic click of the turn signal, the glow of passing streetlights. It was the kind of quiet that usually made me sink into my seat and forget about the day. And for a little while I did. The food sat heavy in my stomach, the warmth of the car pressing the last of the cold from my bones. The whole thing, a man at the park, the diner, the way my hands had trembled against the Formica table, started to feel distant. Then we hit the red light. I wasn't even thinking when I glanced to the side, just a passing flick of my eyes, a habit. But my breath caught mid-exhale. He was there, sitting in the driver's seat of a beat-up blue sedan, hands resting still on the wheel. He wasn't looking at me, wasn't looking at anything. Just sitting there, headlights dull against the night, posture slack like he wasn't even real. I forced my head forward, gripping my knees. No way, no, this isn't possible, I told Marcus. My voice barely worked when I said it, but I forced the words out. And this time he didn't brush it off. I felt the shift in him, the way his fingers curled tighter around the steering wheel, the way his legs stopped bouncing the way it always did at stoplights. We didn't talk after that, didn't say a word, just sat there, stiff and silent, pretending we weren't rattled, pretending we weren't waiting for the light to change like it was the only thing keeping us safe. Neither of us said it out loud, but I could feel it sitting between us. The thick, unshakable weight of being watched, like a hand hovering just over my shoulder, close enough to send a chill through my skin but never touching. The whole thing was ridiculous, wasn't it? Some guy at the park, at the diner, at the light. It was weird, yeah, but weird things happen. That's what I kept telling myself. That's what I wanted to believe. But Marcus didn't turn down our street right away. He didn't say anything, just took a left when he should have gone straight. Another turn, then another. The roads blurred together, dim streetlights passing in slow, steady intervals. Neither of us wanted to admit what we were doing, but it was obvious. We were checking, making sure we were alone. My knee bounced. I kept sneaking glances out the window, half expecting to see that blue sedan lurking at the edge of the frame, but it never showed. No headlights trailing us, no dark figure hunched behind a windshield, just empty streets, the quiet hum of the engine, the slow unraveling of something that had felt so certain minutes ago. By the time we pulled into my driveway, it almost felt stupid, like we'd let some random guy get too deep under our skin. Still, my hands were tight when I grabbed my bag. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me before I even took my shoes off. Stood in the dim hallway, listening to the sound of my own breathing. Double-checked the windows. Told myself I was just being careful. Told myself that was all it was. I don't know how long I sat there after locking up. The house felt too still, too hollow. My mom and sister were out. My dad was still on his trip, so it was just me and the distant hum of the fridge, the occasional creak of old wood settling. I kept telling myself to shake it off. Nothing happened. Nothing real. The air in my room felt heavier than usual. I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling mindlessly, forcing myself into the normalcy of it, just a regular night, just me unwinding after work, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. I should have let it ring out, should have put the phone down, forgotten about it, gone to sleep. Instead, my thumb moved on its own, and before I could think, I answered. At first, there was nothing. No voices, no background noise, just silence stretching too long, pressing in like a held breath, and then breathing. Deep, slow, too controlled to be random. I held my own breath without meaning to, my pulse thudding hard in my ears. The sound wasn't rushed or erratic. It wasn't accidental. Whoever was on the other end wanted me to hear it. I almost hung up, almost convinced myself it was a prank, some glitch, some stupid telemarketer failing to connect their line. But then, just before I could move, just before I could force myself out of the moment, so quiet I could have imagined it, so soft it barely scraped the air. Did you think I'd leave? Then the line clicked dead. I didn't move for a long time after that. Just sat there staring at my screen, watching my own reflection in the glass, waiting for something else to happen. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at my phone, my thoughts looping in tight, suffocating circles. Maybe I misheard. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe my mind was twisting things, making them worse than they were. I kept trying to rationalize, to pull myself back into something that felt normal. But then something else settled in. A feeling, a weight pressing against my back, the distinct, undeniable sensation of being watched. I don't know what made me move, what made me push myself up, walk stiffly across the room. Maybe it was instinct, some deep part of me that already knew what I was going to see. Maybe it was something worse, something that wanted to prove me right. Either way, my hands felt numb as I pulled the curtain back, and there he was, standing on the front lawn, his face half lit by the dull glow of the street lamp, his posture loose like he had all the time in the world, looking up at me, smiling. It wasn't a normal smile. It wasn't forced or polite or anything human. It stretched too wide, too patient, too knowing. I felt my breath catch, felt the cold sink into my chest. I don't even remember grabbing my phone, just that my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Still, I dialed. Still, I pressed the phone to my ear. And outside, in the heavy quiet of the street, he didn't move. The red and blue lights flashed through my window, bouncing off the walls in restless streaks. I don't remember hearing the sirens. I don't even remember the exact moment they arrived. Just the dull knock at the door, the low murmur of voices, the way my legs felt unsteady as I stepped outside. The air was sharp with cold. I gripped my sleeves, scanning the yard, the street, the shadows that felt thicker than they should have been. But he was gone. No sign of him, no footprints in the grass, no trace that anyone had been standing there. Just the quiet press of night, the wind rustling through the trees, and the gnawing certainty that he had been there. The cops didn't seem too concerned. Just some guy hanging around, maybe a vagrant, maybe someone who got the wrong house. Their voices were even, practiced, nothing to be worried about. They asked a few questions, wrote a few things down, but I could already tell they weren't going to do anything. And maybe they were right. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I had overreacted. But I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the dark pressing in, waiting for something to happen. I quit my job as soon as the park closed for the season, told myself it was just bad luck, just a weird night, tried to move on. But even now, sometimes I catch myself thinking about it. If I hadn't looked outside, if I had waited just a little longer, would he still have been there? Would he have stayed? I worked the closing shift at Cedar Highway Diner more times than I could count. The place sat right off the highway, open late enough to catch the occasional trucker or someone passing through town. It wasn't exactly a hot spot, especially not that deep into the night, and most of the time I was just waiting for the hours to tick by. That night, though, something about it felt different. Off. It was the kind of quiet that didn't feel normal. Not peaceful, not the usual lull before we locked up. Just empty in a way that made the diner feel bigger than it was. The air outside was still heavy, and even though I couldn't explain it, I remember feeling like I wanted to be out of there as soon as possible. And then the bell above the door jingled. A man walked in. Late customers weren't anything unusual, but the moment I saw him, I felt something I couldn't shake. Not fear exactly, just a deep, gut-level unease. He was heavy-set, his jeans riding too high, his jacket slightly worn. But it wasn't how he looked that bothered me. It was his face. The way he smiled like we already knew each other. Like he was waiting for something. He sat down at a table and I handed him a menu, telling him the kitchen was closing soon. He barely glanced at it. Just sat there, eyes too focused, grin never slipping. And then he started asking questions. Not just idle chatter, pointed ones. Was I from around here? Did I live nearby? I kept it vague, trying to brush them off. But even as I answered, I felt it, like I'd already said too much. Stepping outside, I expected the usual and near-empty parking lot, just my car and the cook's, maybe a breeze cutting through the silence. But instead, there was a third car. It wasn't parked near the diner, where customers usually left their cars. No, it sat farther out, closer to the highway, like whoever left it there didn't want to be noticed. A dark sedan, maybe an older model though. In the dim light of the lot, it was hard to tell. What stood out the most was the windows. They were too dark, unnaturally so. Tinted maybe, or maybe just the way the night swallowed everything, making it impossible to see inside. I stood there for a second longer than I should have. Could have been empty, could have just been someone who left their car overnight, but something about it didn't sit right. The cook hadn't mentioned it, and I hadn't seen anyone else come in or out besides the man who showed up last minute. So whose car was it? A small nagging thought crawled into the back of my mind, one I didn't want to acknowledge. I told myself not to overthink it. People left their cars in odd places all the time. Maybe it had been there earlier, and I just hadn't noticed. Maybe it wasn't anything at all. So I forced myself to ignore it, adjusted my bag over my shoulder, focused on my own car instead. The shift was over, and all I wanted was to get home. The road home always felt darker at this hour. Not the kind of dark where your eyes adjust, where the glow of passing streetlights or neon signs make it feel alive. No, this was the deep, pressing kind of dark that made everything outside the reach of my headlights feel endless. Maybe it was just the kind of night where my nerves were already wound too tight. Maybe I was just tired. I barely noticed the car at first. Just a pair of headlights in my rear view pulling onto the highway a little after I did. Normal enough. People were always out late. Shifts ending. long drives home. It wasn't anything to think about, until it didn't go away. Every slight speed adjustment I made, it matched. Too far back to be tailgating, too close to be casual. At first I told myself I was imagining it, just a coincidence. But then I took a turn, and it turned. Slowed for a stop sign, and so did it. I gripped the wheel tighter, stomach twisting. My pulse thudded in my ears, louder than my own thoughts. It wasn't normal. I tried to keep my breathing steady, convincing myself that if I acted natural, if I didn't panic, it would make sense. But the longer it stayed behind me, the harder that got. Then, just as I was ready to lose it, just as I thought I'd have to do something, it veered off. A sharp, sudden turn down some side road, disappearing into the night like it had never been there at all. I sat there, hands still clenched around the wheel, trying to push the thought away. I was just being paranoid. It was nothing. I told myself that, over and over, but I didn't believe it. The first ding barely registered. Just another dashboard warning light, the kind that usually meant nothing, cold weather messing with the sensors. A slow leak I could deal with in the morning. But then came another, and another. Rear passenger tire, losing pressure. Fast. Too fast. My hands tightened around the wheel as the car started to vibrate, then shake. It wasn't just the steering wheel. My whole car was trembling like it was coming apart. I eased off the gas. Heart pounding. Whatever was happening, I couldn't keep driving. I had no choice. I pulled onto the shoulder, gravel crunching beneath my tires, and threw it in park. The silence after the engine cut off was suffocating, pressing against my ears like I'd been dropped into a vacuum. Stepping out, the air felt colder than it should have. I circled the back of the car, my pulse a slow, heavy drum in my throat. The second I saw the tire, my stomach dropped, completely flat. Not low, not deflating, flat. I swallowed hard, glancing back at the road, at the dark stretch of highway disappearing in both directions. I hadn't hit anything. No pothole, no debris, nothing that could have done this. Maybe it was just bad luck. A nail, a slow leak that finally gave out. Maybe, or maybe it wasn't. I was still gripping my phone, trying to figure out my next move, when I saw it. Headlights cutting through the darkness, getting closer. Too close. Too slow. The highway had been empty just moments ago, nothing but the occasional rush of a truck in the opposite lane. But now this car was creeping toward me, rolling to a stop just a few feet behind mine. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched. The door opened, and the moment I saw him step out, my stomach dropped. Him. The man from the diner. I felt my whole body tense, some instinct kicking in before my brain could catch up. There was no way, it was just a coincidence. He'd been too curious about me, too many questions, too much interest in things that weren't his business. And now here he was, in the middle of nowhere, pulling up behind my stranded car like it was the most natural thing in the world. He smiled, like we were old friends running into each other by chance, as if this wasn't the last place I wanted to see him. And then I saw his hands. Gloves. It was like a switch flipped in my head. My breath hitched, and I could feel my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. He hadn't been wearing gloves at the diner. He hadn't needed them then. But now, here in the dark, on the side of the road, with no one around, he was too surprised to see me. Too surprised, like he was playing a role, waiting for me to react. And I realized right then that I wasn't just unlucky. I was in trouble. I didn't move. Didn't unlock the door. Just sat there, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I wasn't stupid. I didn't trust him. He stood there, still smiling, still pretending this was normal. He motioned for me to roll the window down, just a little more, just enough. I barely cracked it, just enough to talk, just enough to keep a barrier between us. My phone sat in my lap, the screen dim, but I had it open, my fingers slowly moving, dialing. I had to be careful, had to keep my face neutral, had to make it look like I wasn't doing anything at all. He kept talking, kept offering to help, kept insisting I step out, making it sound like I was the one being difficult, like I was being rude. The way he pushed, not with his words but with his tone, made my skin crawl. He was waiting for something, for the right moment, and then it happened. The explosion of sound, the sharp crack of glass giving way, sent me recoiling. My whole body jerked back as shards of my own window rained over me, cutting into my arms, my legs. My ears rang from the force of it. But before I could even react, I felt movement, his arm reaching in, fingers closing around my phone, and then it was gone. The last link I had to help, the only thing keeping me tethered to some kind of safety, ripped from my lap and flung into the dark. I barely registered the sound of him running, the crunch of gravel under his feet, the slam of a car door, then nothing, just the hum of my car engine, just the wind, and me, alone, stranded, with nothing but shattered glass, and the cold realization that I had never been in control of this situation. Not for a second. The red and blue lights cut through the darkness long before I saw the cars. The moment I heard the sirens, I felt everything in me unravel. My body sagged, my hands shaking too hard to grip the wheel anymore. I don't remember stepping out. I don't remember my legs moving, just the overwhelming relief when I saw the officers. The way I waved my arms like I had to prove I was real, that this was happening. They found my phone first, or what was left of it. The screen shattered. The body dented like it had been stomped on. It was useless. So was trying to explain what had just happened, because saying it out loud made it feel even more unreal. They checked the diner cameras, looked through every second of footage, and that's when I saw it, him, outside before ever walking in, pacing near the cars. Near mine. He had been there the whole time. Watching, waiting, but they never caught him. The investigation dragged, and then it faded. Just another case left unresolved. Just another man who vanished into the night. I quit the diner after that, told myself it was paranoia, that I was letting fear win. But that didn't change the way I flinched every time I saw a car slow down near me. Didn't change the feeling that somewhere, in some other town, at some other late-night diner, he was doing it again, waiting for someone else. I've worked the late shift at Mel's roadside diner long enough to know what to expect. Nights like these, rain hammering the pavement, the neon sign flickering against the wet asphalt, usually meant silence, fewer customers, just me, the distant hum of the coffee machine, and the occasional trucker stopping by for a cup to get him through the last stretch of his drive. That night started no differently. The place was empty, just the low buzz of the radio filling the space. I was already counting down the hours when the door swung open and the little bell above it jingled. A man stepped in first, shaking the water from his coat. Behind him, a girl followed. Something about them made me take notice. He looked older, 40s maybe. She, barely in her 20s, if that. She was small, thin, hood of her sweater pulled halfway over her face, her dark hair damp from the rain. They both paused at the entrance, looking straight at me before I even had the chance to greet them. "Just the two of you?" I asked. The man nodded, smiling as he stepped forward. She didn't respond, just hovered behind him like she wasn't sure she should be there. I led them to a booth near the window, where the streetlights outside cast long shadows across the rain-slicked road. They took a long time to order, long enough that I noticed how quiet they were with each other, not in a comfortable way, more like there was something unspoken hanging between them. When they finally did order, just coffee for him, a milkshake for her, I figured that was that. But then the man started talking. At first, it was nothing unusual. Friendly banter, the kind of thing I was used to from customers who wanted to pass the time. But his questions came quick, one after the other. How long had I worked here? Did I like the job? Did I live far? I answered without thinking, barely pausing between refilling his coffee and wiping down the counter. I told him I lived nearby, not too far up the road. Said it was quiet around here. Not much ever happened. I even joked about how nights like these made the diner feel like something out of a horror movie, isolated and empty, except for the lone waitress behind the counter. He smiled at that, stirring his coffee slowly. The girl kept her eyes down, stirring her milkshake in the same slow circles. Then, just as casually as the rest, he asked, "Do you live alone?" I answered before I even had time to think. Just an automatic "yeah, I do." And then I moved on, the way you do when you think you're just making small talk, the way you do when you don't realize, in that moment, that you've said something you'll regret later. By the time my shift ended, the storm had turned mean. Rain lashed against the windshield the whole drive home, my wipers barely keeping up. The roads were mostly empty, just dark stretches of pavement broken up by the occasional streetlight, the occasional passing car. It wasn't a long drive, maybe 10 minutes. But something about it felt longer that night, the kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful, the kind that sat too heavy in the air. I pulled into the driveway, cutting the engine. My place was the middle floor of a 3-unit house. There was a side entrance with a stairwell that led to all 3 floors, but I always used the front door. It was easier, and besides, I liked knowing exactly who was coming and going. The rain was still coming down hard as I ran up the short walkway. I fumbled for my keys, already picturing the warmth inside, the comfort of dry clothes. But when I reached for the doorknob, my hand froze. The door wasn't locked. Not wide open, not broken in, just slightly ajar, barely enough to notice, just enough that if I hadn't reached for it, I might have walked right in without realizing. For a second, I just stood there, listening. The rain hitting the roof, the wind shaking the trees, nothing else. My stomach knotted up. I told myself it was fine. I must have been in a hurry that morning, left it unlocked without thinking. It happens, doesn't mean anything. Still, my fingers felt stiff as I pushed it open. I stepped inside, flicking on the light. The small kitchen, the worn-out couch, the framed picture on the wall, everything exactly where it should be. No drawers open, no muddy footprints. I locked the door behind me, double-checking the deadbolt. Then I checked it again, just in case. It must have been past midnight when the knocking started. Not a polite tap, not the kind of knock you give when you're just stopping by. It was hard, frantic, like whoever was on the other side needed it immediately. I had just started drifting off. The storm was still going strong, the kind that made the whole building groan under the weight of the wind. I wasn't even fully awake yet when I stumbled out of bed, pulse already picking up. The knocking didn't stop. Whoever it was, they weren't leaving. I made my way to the door, flipping on the porch light before getting too close. The glass storm door let me see just enough. A girl, small, soaked through, her hoodie clinging to her frame. She had the hood up, her face mostly hidden in shadow, but I could see her mouth moving. She was saying something, but between the wind and the rain I could barely make it out. I inched closer. "Please," she was saying. "Please, I just need a phone. Just for a second. There's a man, he's following me." I didn't move, didn't reach for the lock. Something about her made my skin crawl. She kept glancing over her shoulder like she expected someone to come lunging out of the dark at any second. But that was the thing. She didn't actually look scared. I don't know how to explain it. It was like she was acting scared. The way a person might think they're supposed to look in this situation. But it didn't sit right. And then, as she turned just slightly, I saw it. The way the porch light caught the side of her face, recognition slammed into me. I knew her. Or at least I'd seen her before. She was the girl from the diner, the one sitting with him. I didn't move. I just stared at her, my mind catching up too slowly. It was like a puzzle shifting into place. The edges blurry at first, then suddenly too clear. She was from the diner. The quiet girl, the one who barely spoke while he did all the talking. But why was she here now? She knocked again, harder this time, her breath fogging up the glass. "Please," she mouthed, and then she turned her head, just slightly, just enough that her body went completely still. I don't know why, but that was the thing that made my stomach drop. Not the knocking, not her begging, but the way she just stopped. I followed her gaze before I even meant to, eyes drifting past the porch, past the driveway, past the sheets of rain blurring the street outside. And then I saw him, a figure standing just beyond the streetlight, not running, not shouting, just there. The rain distorted him, made his shape flicker in and out of focus, but I knew, even before my brain fully caught up. I knew, the diner, the man from the diner, the one who had asked too many questions, the one she had been sitting with, So why was she here now, acting like she was running from him? Why was she at my door, and why, even though he wasn't moving, did it feel like he was already too close? I slammed the door shut, locked it, stepped back like that thin slab of wood was enough to keep something out, something I didn't even fully understand yet. My head was spinning. I reached for my phone, fingers shaking, about to call someone, anyone, when my eyes flicked toward the window. No headlights, no familiar shapes in the driveway, no neighbor's car parked along the curb. The house was empty. I was alone. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing, but my mind was already dragging me backward, back to the diner, to the man sitting across from the quiet girl, to the way he had kept steering the conversation back to me. How long have you worked here? Where do you live? Do you live alone? I had answered without thinking, brushed it off as small talk, the way people do, the kind of question that makes you hesitate for half a second, but doesn't quite register as wrong until it's too late. But it wasn't small talk. It was never small talk. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't making something out of nothing. This tonight wasn't random. I felt it now, deep in my gut, the way you feel the drop before the fall, the way you know the moment you've made a mistake. I had given them exactly what they needed, and now they were here. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes maybe, maybe longer. My hands were still curled around my phone, but I hadn't dialed. I wasn't sure why. Maybe part of me still wanted to believe this was all some misunderstanding, that any second now, the rain would swallow them up and I could pretend none of this had happened. But then the knocking started. Not at the front door, somewhere else, deeper inside the house. I froze, pulse hammering against my ribs. It took me a second to place the sound, to really hear where it was coming from. Not the porch, not a window, the stairway door, the one that led to the shared hallway, the one no one should have been able to get to. I swallowed hard, straining to hear over the storm outside, but there it was again. 3 steady knocks, not frantic, not rushed, slow, even, deliberate. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I just stood there waiting for them to say something, to call out a name, give me some excuse to believe this wasn't what it felt like. But they didn't. They just knocked again, and again, and again. The cops came. They checked the house, the yard, the stairway, took my statement, asked if I had seen where they went, if I could describe them. I told them what I could, but I already knew how this would end. No leads, no suspects, just a weird, unsettling story to put in a report. They told me I should stay somewhere else for a while. So I did. I left that night, drove straight to my parents' house without looking back. I barely slept. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that I had let my imagination twist a bad situation into something worse. Maybe it was all just a weird coincidence. Maybe I let myself believe that. Until I came back, I had only been home for a few minutes when my upstairs neighbor stopped me in the hall. He was standing by the stairway door, frowning at something. I didn't want to look, but I did, and there it was, scrawled in marker, right there on the wood. "See you soon, Anna." My stomach turned. I don't even remember what I said to my neighbor. Maybe nothing. Maybe I just turned around, went inside, and started packing. I didn't care how paranoid it made me seem. I wasn't waiting to find out what happened next.